Hello, sir, folks. How are you doing? How are we doing? Super great from whatever you're watching us from. As you know, this is your presenter, Jindok Stories, and I'm hoping that you are super fine. Now, I'm sorry today for not showing myself for some reasons, but here we have something important to talk about. Like you understand, all the contemporary things that are happening today in the United States. One of the major things that are happening today is the question of segregation. White folks, particularly the white Americans, are asking black people, why is it that, like right now, you want segregation so bad? While we know very well that this is something that you don't need it. I mean, you don't want it, right? And black people are coming out and discussing how and why segregation has always been there for them. Like, this is something that they've lived with, so they can't just come out and pretend like nothing is happening, right? Because you know that segregation has always been a reality for black people, whether enforced by the law or sustained through social and economic structures. We remember from the days of slavery to Jim Crow laws and even modern redlining and systemic discrimination, right? Black communities have been always isolated, excluded, and denied from opportunities to integrate fully into mainstream society. Yet, when black people begin to advocate for self-sufficiency, economic empowerment, and cultural preservation, suddenly, out of nowhere, white society starts framing it as segregation, as if black people are the ones who are initiating separation. And you know that this deliberate misinterpretation ignores the historical realities that segregation has always been imposed on black people and not chosen by them. This is something that have always been imposed to black people. I mean, this is something that they never chose it to happen to them, right? So I want us to hear people's perspective while they talk about the things that they grew up with to prove that segregation has always been there, has always been imposed to black people. So let's watch the video. I'll be back. As you know, this is a presenter, Jindok Stories, and I'm sorry for not showing myself today. For some reasons, I had to do the voiceover because of, 1, 2, 3. But until then, I want us to watch this video. I'll be back and I'll be giving my commentary as usual. So let's watch the video.
When I was in the 3rd grade, my mother put me on a bus and she told me I was going to a school where I can get a better education and be a part of the American dream. When I got there, I saw a bunch of protesters out there saying, "In, go home, porch monkey, jungle bunny," and all of those different things. I'm trying to figure out to this day, was that when America was great? A few years later, in that same school, a white girl decided that she wanted to spit on me, slap me, and call me the N-word. I hit her back. Next thing I know, got my head slammed into a chalk rail. And it hurt for a long time, and I still have side effects from it. But the thing that was the most important was I was told that day that you never touch a white person. I think back today, was America great at that point in time? Or was it the time maybe that my mother and I went to a store and we had to change buses, and it was cold and snowing, so we decided to walk into this restaurant and get us some hot chocolate and coffee and sit down for a minute until we could see the bus coming. We ordered our coffee and hot chocolate, and the white man made us get out. I'm like, is America great when a man puts a woman and child out in the cold and the snow just because of the color of their skin? I don't think so. I remember when I was standing outside with some friends of mine and we were minding our business on our own block. Police came up, started harassing us, and I said, "Why are you giving us such a hard time?" I got hit in my mouth with a flashlight, knocked out a few of my front teeth. Was America great at that point in my life for me? No. I finally got a black job. My alderman wrote a letter for me and I got a job at a hospital working as a maintenance mechanic, which I was not qualified for. The guys who I worked with broke in my locker and urinated in my boots, and HR did nothing about it. To this day, I wonder if that was the opportunity for America to be great and me finally to get a job based on the color of my skin, but I did not work it out. Fast forward a couple of years later, I'm working for a major electronics retailer. I did it the American way. I worked my way up from the bottom to the top. I started at the lowest department in that organization, and I worked me up to be the best salesperson in the country. I was next on the list to get a store. When my time came up to get a store, I was told it's the right time for the right man at the right job for the right job. That's why you were going to have to pass you up, because it's not that time. Guess it really didn't matter if you worked hard and did everything that you're supposed to do. A couple of years ago, I was passed over for a promotion by a major mortgage company. The person that they promoted me, they actually had this person on tape saying that he didn't want to go into a restaurant because he didn't want to be around a bunch of N-words. And I said, "Why would you promote him over me?" And my manager, regional manager, called me and he told me, he said, "Well, I'm a minority too, so I understand how you feel." I say, "First of all, you're Asian, which makes you the preferred minority. I say, when the police lights come on, you don't fear for your life. See, let me tell you a couple of quick stories. So I told them one when I was driving my little raggedy Lexus. Police followed me for 2 miles. Sirens went on. I started fearing for my life. But I followed black protocol when you're pulled over by the police. I lowered my window down slowly. Police officer came up, unholstered his weapon. I have not done anything threatening. He's got his weapon unholstered, and he's got his hand on his gun. He leans in my car and asks me, "Is this your car? And have you been arrested in the last 12 months?" I'm sure he knows this is my car because he's been behind me for the last 2 miles. But anyway, America wasn't great. Then you go to the situation where I was driving my little $100,000 plus car. Police saw me, they turned around real quickly. Next thing I know, I got pulled over. Guy said, "You were speeding." I said, "No, officer, I was not." He said, "Have you been drinking?" I say, "Sir, I don't drink this early in the morning." He said, "Step out of the car." I refused. I got my wife on the phone and I had her on speaker, so he knew that she was listening to the conversation. He had already called for 4 additional cars. When they got there, he gave me my ticket. But as he walked away, I could hear him say, "That little bitch called his wife. We can't do nothing." I have no idea what that meant. But this just lets me know that America still wasn't great. I'm saying all of this to you people who don't understand what it's like for black people in America. And I can tell you a lot more stories. And I'm sure my grandparents and their parents can tell you stories too, which are probably a lot worse than mine. But the thing is that this house, this America house right now is divided because you have people who are praying for peace and you have people who are preparing for war. And that's what this administration wants because it's corrupt. I'll say this to you, the folks who call themselves MAGA supporters and Christians. You suffer from convenient scripture amnesia. The 2 scriptures that you seem to forget. One of those scriptures says, "How can you love your God in heaven who you've never seen and hate your brother who you see every day?" And the other one says, "Love thy neighbor as thyself." I'm going to continue to pray for America because I do love this country, but there are a lot of things that I do not like about it. Love y'all. Peace.
Hey, a lot of talk going around about segregation. A lot of young people with their own thoughts and poking fun and making jokes and, well, the food's going to be better seasoned over here. The reason why, for me, this talk about segregation is absolutely frightening is because I remember having an asthma attack at 5 years old. I was living in the projects in New York City, and if you know anything about back then and the ambulance, it took forever. My father was on a handball court, and my mother screamed out the window, "John can't breathe." My father comes running upstairs to the 7th floor of the building, puts me in a stroller, and runs with me in a stroller to the hospital. Get to the hospital, they take care of my asthma, I'm admitted. My father, 2 days later, comes to see me. A nurse sees him. Now, my father's black. The nurse sees him by my bed, calls the security. Security calls the police. My father was thrown out of the building because they never considered the possibility of him being my father, even though I was screaming and crying that he was my father. It wasn't until my mother showed up hours later that my dad was released. I think I saw him 3 more times after that. He just vanished. Because the world told him he didn't belong by his son. I try to imagine being absolutely humiliated and a bunch of strangers telling you that you can't be around your own child because of how you look. It had been so long since I had seen my father. I came home from the military and he was playing chess in Midtown Manhattan, and as a gag, I just showed up and started playing chess with him, and he didn't recognize me. And I could see the shame in his face when he realized he had been playing chess with his son for an hour. The last time society broke my father, when my mother was 6 months pregnant with me, my father took her out to eat at this Italian restaurant. Reluctantly. I don't think my mother really wrapped her head around the gravity of 1969, 1970, and how absolutely dangerous it was for a black man to be walking into a white, predominantly white Italian restaurant with a pregnant white woman. Men from the restaurant screamed out, "Hey, tell them there ain't no fried chicken in here." And my mother cursed everybody out. When they left, the men from inside the restaurant had jumped into 2 cars, followed my parents along the highway, ran them off the road, and nearly beat both of them to death. Because the message in society said, not only do you not belong together, but you don't belong anywhere around us. All this talk about segregation, shit ain't funny. And a lot of you young people, you don't talk to your grandparents enough. I remember my grandmother telling a story about being in the South and walking to school and walking past the remnants of the lynching with a person still up there. And then she went to school. Walked past that same image on her way home. Some of you really have no clue. Some of you everybody's so we're all so worried about losing our fucking jobs that we don't even realize we're about to lose our souls. And I'm trying not to panic. And I'm trying not to be dramatic or, overthink. But I have witnessed far too many times how much of a meat grinder this country can be. I worry about us. I just worry. Love yourselves.
For you Trump supporters that don't understand why people think that you're racist, this is why. The same thing you do with minority social issues is the same thing you did with Kamala Harris. You are more likely to believe negativity about people with darker skin than you are to believe a white person telling you how they're going to hurt you. Donald Trump told you who he was before his presidency. He tried an insurrection to overthrow democracy because he lost, and he sympathizes with a dictator. He didn't even have a plan of how to make the economy better, and you still chose him. When the other option had a very clearly laid out plan, has worked in 3 branches of government, and has been trying to upload the law her entire career. But you still voted for the felon. If you just looked at those options on paper, there was no comparison. But because you put white man and black woman into the mix, your mind told you white man has to be leader, white man must be better, let's vote for him. The reason that we know that you're racist is because you are more likely to believe lies from white people than truths from dark skin. It's what you do when you look at immigrants. You assume the negativity about them because their skin is darker. And I say immigrants and darker even though there are white immigrants, because the only time you think of immigrants is when you think of somebody with melanin in their skin. Another form of your bigotry. We call you racist because you don't give the same opportunities, even mentally, to darker skinned people as white people. You're more likely to side with white people. You're more likely to believe white people, even when they're hurting you, than you are to believe a neutral black person. That's why we know you're racist.
We are living in a country that is taking people to concentration camps. You can call it a fucking deportation center if that's what helps you sleep at night, but you know what the fuck it is. The same way they went and rounded up the Jews during the Holocaust is the same way they're going to round up these immigrants. And they want to paint it under the guise of they're all in gangs, they're all evil, they gotta go. And not only that, we've already seen where they have these students that are over here with student visas that came over here legally, they followed the rules, and then their status to legally be in America gets revoked because they protested something that the current administration didn't like. We've already seen U.S. citizens get arrested by ICE, and then it's just the oops, my bad. You are living in a country that has concentration camps. You don't believe me? Where did they take them? All these thousands of ICE arrests since January of this year, where did they take them all? They didn't all go to Guantanamo Bay. They didn't all go to El Salvador. Where are they taking them? Okay, cool. You know the location of the deportation centers? What are the conditions like in there? How long are some of these people that have been arrested, how long have they been there? What's their treatment like? You're living in a country with concentration camps. They could be unaliving them right now, one by one. How would we know? They could be forcing them to work. I highly doubt those conditions are anywhere near humane. And I also refuse to believe that everybody that has entered the country without proper documentation in the last 5 years, I refuse to believe that all of them are just the most pitiful, worst of the worst humans you could ever come across. The only reason they want you to believe that is so that when they round these people up and do fucked up shit to them, they want to believe that this lie they're telling you is so readily absorbed by their supporters that when we see that these are in fact concentration camps, that it's supposed to go over a lot better. Like, come on, you're living in a country with concentration camps. I know this doesn't apply to all white people, but to the white people it applies to. What is up with y'all? What is this weird sense of control and entitlement and just all-out distaste for inclusion, or you have this innate hatred for anything that isn't like you or doesn't think the way like you? Like, what is that? I'm talking to the people that think that America was for white people. This is the white man's land. Y'all weren't even here first. Christopher and them took this bitch by force. So if it was your God-given destined land, why the fuck weren't you here first? Oh, well, this part of society was meant for white men, and white women were supposed to have access to this. And what did Trump say? Oh, birthright citizenship was meant for slaves. It wasn't meant for everybody to just come over here and have babies and then be American. Just shut the fuck up. Like, why does it all have to be for you? That is some spoon-fed bullshit. Sure, I get a little annoyed when people walk into where I'm working or where I am, or they come up to me and they say, speak Spanish? No, this is an English-speaking country. I don't readily speak Spanish. I'm sorry. Sure, it's a little bit annoying. I'm just not as big of a dickhead as y'all are, because I know I can pull out my fucking phone, open the interpreter app, and it might take 5 seconds. And now you have... The technology is there. I've said it before. Y'all will pay monthly for this fucking phone service, and y'all have to have the latest, most up-to-date technology, hardware, software, all this bullshit. You gotta have 5G. Pay for it every fucking month. You got a phone in your hand right now, most likely over $800. But then when it comes to using, I don't know, a fucking interpreter app that came installed on the goddamn phone, all you have to do is speak into it and select the language that it needs to be translated into. And it'll play the translation out fucking loud. And then the person who speaks the other language can speak their native language into the motherfucking phone, and it will spit it back out to you in your native language. You literally pay monthly for that fucking service, on top of a slew of other services. But then rather than use the tools that are readily available to you, you want to say, oh, these, sure, it's their responsibility to take the initiative to learn English, but you don't have to be a dickhead in the moment and start demonizing immigrants just because you're too fucking lazy to use an app. So I don't want to draw this out. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page before, like, it becomes some big news story like we're going to be fucking shocked. We live in a country with concentration camps. It's just immigrants instead of Jews this time. How the fuck can you be a proud American right now? Oh, before I forget, before MAGA hops in my comments talking about some, well, Kamala and Biden lost all the, what about what they did with the immigrants? Oh, yeah, well, if you can prove that, then fuck them too. How many times do we have to get on here and fucking say that? If you can prove anything negative y'all have said about the Democrats, fuck them too. We've been screaming at y'all that y'all are in a fucking cult. And then you try to come at us as if we won't. You know what I mean? But no matter what Trump does, Trump could walk in your home right now and shit on your floor and stomp on it and smear it around. And you would probably get a spoon and eat that shit up, man.
The coal industry heavily supported Donald Trump, and now they're finding out that he doesn't care about them. He recently enacted fees in U.S. ports for Chinese flagged and built vessels. Well, now vessels aren't picking up American coal. And according to ex-Coal Energy and Resource CEO, that these fees are going to cost $130 billion to the company, as nobody's willing to ship their coal, as it's now 35% more expensive than anywhere else on the global market. He went on to say that over 5,000 individuals will lose their jobs due to them not being able to export fuel. And that's just through the export company and the miners that they have contracts with. This doesn't involve, or doesn't even include, the railways and the additional port workers who would be helping load and unload and transport this coal around the country. Other industries have also sounded the alarm against these, including the American Petroleum Institute, who exports oil, liquefied natural gas, and other refined fuels through U.S. ports around the world. Now their prices are expected to go up 35%, resulting in their exports going down, which will also result in more lost jobs in the country. Farmers are also feeling this burden, as their prices that are already affected by tariffs now have an additional 35% tax.
Now, white people silence concern of black discussion about segregation. You know very well that it is so revealing. Because for centuries they have benefited from the black exclusion, controlling access to wealth, resources, and opportunities, while ensuring that black people remained marginalized. Now, as black people discuss ownership of business, independent schools, and community-driven economics, it threatens the status quo. The real issue is not that black people want segregation, but that they are reclaiming autonomy, which disrupts the dominant power structure. The question then arises, why was forced segregation acceptable when it served white interests? But self-determined separation for black empowerment is considered problematic? I find that so problematic, indeed. Now, the historical context of black self-reliance movements such as the Marcus Garvey, the UNIA, the Nation of Islamic Economic Progress, and even the early success of Black Wall Street, all of this demonstrates that black people have often sought independence, not out of hate, but necessity. These movements were a response to exclusion, violence, and systemic oppression, not a desire to separate arbitrarily. When black communities have built self-sustaining systems, they have faced hostility, sabotage, and destruction. From the bombing of the Tulsa in 1921 to the dismantling of the Black Panthers community programs, right? And these patterns suggest that white discomfort is less about segregation itself and more about black people escaping dependency on white control systems. Also, another thing to note on is the additional modern integration has often been one-sided. You know very well that this has been benefiting white institutions while leaving black communities destabilized. Many black businesses declined after integration because economic power shifted away from the black neighborhoods to white-owned corporations. Schools that were disgenerated often resulted in black students being placed in hostile environments while black teachers lost their jobs. Integration did not mean equality, it means assimilation on terms that still privileged white people. This is why some black thinkers and leaders argue that black true empowerment comes from the forced integration, but from building strong, self-reliant, self-sufficient communities that control their own economy and education destiny. Also, another thing is that this conversation, you really need to get and look at it deep. It exposes a deeper contradiction in how racial dynamics function in society. When white people segregate black people through discriminatory laws, exclusionary housing policies, and economic suppression, there was no outcry about the dangers of separation. Yet, when black people advocate for economic independence, community control, and cultural unity, it is suddenly framed as a desire for division. Right? And this reaction suggests that white discomfort is not about the concept of segregation itself, but the loss of control over black people. Let that sink. The same individual who questions why black people would want segregation rarely questions why predominantly white neighborhoods, schools, and businesses still exist without the same level of scrutiny. Another thing that I would like to add on, the idea that integration automatically leads to progress ignores the fact that true integration has fully occurred. Black communities have historically been underfunded, and when segregation happened, it often meant that black communities, black spaces were dismantled rather than strengthened. Schools that were forced to integrate often resulted in black students losing access, black teachers and administrators who understood their cultural experiences. Black professionals were often left out industries that remained controlled by white interest. Integration, for example, in practice, has not been mutual inclusion, but rather about black people being forced into spaces where they are still disadvantaged, while their own institutions are weakened or destroyed. Also, the notion that black people should aspire to integrate assumes that proximity to whiteness is the ultimate goal. However, we need to note this. History has shown that proximity does not mean equality. Black people who have entered predominantly white institutions often face racism, tokenization, and barriers to advancement. Meanwhile, white people rarely have to integrate into black spaces for economic survival. These imbalances highlight why white people rarely have to integrate into black spaces, right? And these imbalances highlights why black sufficiency is necessary. Not because black people seek isolation, but because integration has delivered the justice and equity that was promised. If anything, the burden of assimilation has always fallen on black people, while white institutions maintain their dominance and exclusivity. White people's concern about the discussion on separation also ignores how the communities practice economic and cultural self-reliance without controversy. Let's take, for example, Jewish, Asian, and other economic groups often prioritize building their own schools, businesses, and neighborhoods without being accused of wanting segregation. When black people seek the same, it is framed as radical or divisive. This double standard reveals a deeper fear that black economic and social independence threatens the existence of racial hierarchy. If black communities become self-sufficient, they are no longer dependent on white control systems, which in turn weakens the power and privilege that those systems maintain. Ultimately, we might have this debate, and this debate is not about segregation in the traditional sense. It is about power, control, and the right of black people to determine their own destiny. White society has never had issues with black separation when it was forced upon black people to their detriment. The real concern arises when black people take control of their own narrative, economy, and institution. This is not about division. It is about sovereignty. The controversy should shift from black people want segregation to why white society has always resisted black autonomy. The answer lies in the historical reality that black self-sufficiency threatens the systems built on black dependency. So this is something that has always been happening, right? So I wanted to watch this video. I'll be back and then we'll have a proper discussion oh, we've watched the video. I want us to, like, tell me what you feel. Tell me what you think about this video. As you know, these are presented Jintok Stories, and I'm hoping to see you on my next video. But until then, peace, love, and harmony. Salute.